outward supply. Now, when you look at outward supply, importantly, what we do as on date, we are filing GSTR 1 and corresponding outward supply we are showing in GSTR 3B. And this 1 and 3B we need to match with the books of accounts. Now, while matching with the books of accounts, there has to be reconciliation to be prepared. And you should be ready to get it prepared in such a way that you would be easy to prepare your GSTR 9 and 9C. Now, so what are the compliances importantly in outward supply? The first one, classification and GST rate. Though I am talking about financial year 22-23, but it is important you must revisit your classification of goods and classification of services and corresponding HSN for the goods, SEC code for services. And I'm sure you must be knowing that, but I'm repeating the same. From 1st April 2021, it is compulsorily for quoting of minimum 4-digit for those registered person whose aggregate turnover is up to 5 crore. 4-digit for all B2B supply. If your aggregate turnover is up to 5 crore. For B2C, it is optional. But if your aggregate turnover is more than 5 crore, then compulsorily 6-digit HSN code for goods, SEC code for services. Compulsory, whether it is B2B supply or B2C supply. And I'm sure you must know the meaning of B2B versus B2C. Simple. Registered supplier to registered recipient B2B. Registered supplier to unregistered recipient B2C. So if aggregate turnover more than 5 crore, compulsorily 6-digit HSN code for goods, SEC code for services. If it is export and import of goods, quite obvious, 8-digit HSN code need to be mentioned. Now, having said classification and corresponding HSN code and SEC compliances, you need to go back and check all your tax invoices. Simultaneously, next responsibility would be to check GST rate as applicable for the goods corresponding to its HSN code or SEC code for services. Where from you will check and verify? If you want to cross-check GST rate for any particular goods, you need to go back notification number 1/2017 under CGST. And there is corresponding notification in IGST and SGST or UTGST. So, for cross-checking and verification of rate, GST rate, so you have to go back to 1/2017 for goods. What about services? 11/2017. 11/2017 under CGST. So this is for the rate checking and verification. Why it is important? It is important for the region that you must ensure that you are properly classifying your goods or services and corresponding GST rate as applicable. So I have explained to all of you that what is the classification and importance of rate. Now, having said that, next important point, and which is Very much important. When we look at any business transaction, we have several queries in our mind. What is that query in our mind? That, sir, if I have received the advance money for supply of goods at a future date, whether GST applicable on advance money. Sometime I am being asked that I have received the money, but if I don't disclose, don't raise invoice, then why? Whether GST leviable. Sometime I get a question that, sir, I have raised the invoice, but I am not being received the payment from my customer. Do we need to pay GST? These are the questions still haunting, and we are asking these questions one by one. I'm going to answer each one of you today. For determining that GST leviable, of course, we have to go back to chargeable section 9 of CGST Act, rate based section 5 of IGST Act. Then we have to check whether supply made or not made, supply of goods or services. Now what is important we have to check? For checking out whether advance money received for supply of goods, whether chargeable to GST, then we have to go back to time of supply provision. Section 12 of CGST Act. Section 12 subsection 2 is talking about that earliest of two event would be the time of supply, point of taxation. I will explain what is this point of taxation. If I am a supplier of goods, if I have raised the invoice, then date of invoice would be the time of supply, A, and B, it's last date when I'm supposed to raise invoice. So sometime you are not raising invoice and you are assuming that no GST leviable. You have supplied the goods but still not raised the invoice, and your confusion and assumption is no GST leviable, to done away with. To remove this mistake, please bear in your mind, there is specific provision in GST law under section 31 subsection 1 of CGST Act by when you should raise the invoice. So time of supply talking about date when you are raising invoice, or last date when you are supposed to raise the invoice. So you must know what is the last date. And there was another provision that receipt of money by the supplier. So 3 event was given, and earliest of any event would be the point of taxation. But to tell you and inform you all, no GST against advance received for supply of goods. It is being done away with, not applicable. With effect from 15th of November 2017, you may note that advance received for supply of goods, no GST. So you have to see only two event, date of invoice and last date when you should raise the invoice. 31 subsection 1. What is that last date? If supply involves movement of goods, then you must raise invoice, on or before supply of goods, removal of goods. So supply involves movement of goods, you must ensure you are raising invoice, tax invoice, on or before removal of goods. So you can't remove the goods without raising the invoice. If you are doing so, then your transaction would be caught by the department and there would be hefty penalty. 200% of tax amount is the penalty for taxable goods under section 129 of CGST Act. Be careful. If it is any other case, it is not involving movement of goods, then it is being stated when goods are made available or delivery to the recipient, you should raise the invoice. So these are the two criteria when you should raise the invoice. Now when I'm talking about invoice, I will come back for services as well. So this is what when supplier is liable to pay GST under forward charge method. GST, we all are aware, is going to be levied by supplier of goods or services generally. But there is specified goods, I'm repeating again, for which recipient buyer is liable to pay GST, not the supplier. And that is falling under reverse charge method, RCM method, reverse charge method. So first of all, you must know from where you will come to know that what all goods, specified goods, subject to RCM, for which recipient liable to pay GST. You have to go back to notification number 4/2017, 4/2017, wherein certain goods are being notified subject to RCM liability. When I said RCM, then recipient has to pay GST, right? So what would be point of taxation? What would be time of supply for RCM applicable for goods? Section 12, subsection 3. Maybe I'm repeating some of the things for you and it would be recap. You may revisit your transaction and check. Earliest of these following transaction which I am referring would be time of supply. First, date of receipt of goods by the recipient, because recipient need to pay GST under reverse charge. Date of payment by the recipient, or date following the end of 30 days, 30, from date of invoice raised by the supplier of goods. So you have to check these three transactions, three event rather. Whichever is earliest, that would be POT, time of supply provision for GST to be deposited with the department. So this is pertaining to goods. Come back to services now. Services. First, forward charge. The supplier of service is liable to pay GST generally. So supplier of service need to check section 13 subsection 2 of CGST Act. And earliest of three transaction, three event rather, earliest of three would be the point of taxation, time of supply. What is this earliest of three? Date of receipt of payment by the supplier of service, payment. Second, date of invoice, provided invoice is being raised within specified time period as per section 31 subsection 2 of CGST Act. So what is the time period specified under section 31 subsection 2? It is 30 days, and it is being stated that supplier of service must raise the invoice before or after the provision of service, but within stipulated 30 days time period. So if I'm rendering service today on 25th September, I'm giving one opinion to you today. I must generate tax invoice by 25th, which is, you can say, 24th October, 30 days. So this is what 30 days criteria, but it is 45 days for banking and non-banking financial companies. And last one, if you don't raise invoice within a stipulated time period, as I stated now, then date of provision of service, earliest of 3 even going to be the point of taxation. So if you receive advance money for supply of services, that would be POT, time of supply, GST leviable. You need not require to raise tax invoice, but receipt voucher and GST to be paid. And whenever you raise invoice and corresponding GST, that would be adjusted with the GST paid on advance money received for supply of services. That is how the provision is being governed through GSTR 1 and 3B. So this is for forward charge, when a supplier is liable to pay GST under forward charge method. There's one another concept which is called continuous supply of service. What is this continuous supply? If you go back to section 2, subsection 33 of CGST Act, continuous supply of service means a service which is recurrent in nature for a period exceeding more than 3 months. Recurring in nature for a period exceeding more than 3 months. So real estate sector, construction sector, renting agreement, where renting agreement is more than 3 months, continuous. It is continuous supply of service. And for continuous supply of service, there is a provision under section 31 subsection 5 of CGST Act, when you should raise the invoice, because that is one of the event for determining time of supply. So it is being stated under section 31 subsection 5 like this: if payment term is ascertainable from the contract, payment term, due date of payment is ascertainable from the contract, then you should raise the invoice on or before this due date of payment. If payment term is not ascertainable, then when you are receiving the money, so you should raise the invoice on or before this receipt of money. Otherwise, if payment term criteria is not applicable, then the milestone which is defined in the contract, so you should raise invoice on or before that milestone which is defined in the contract as a completion of activity, service. So for continuous supply of service, you need to look at 31 subsection 5. Now coming to the reverse charge, RCM, where recipient of service need to pay GST, not the supplier. Question would be, which notification you will look at to check that what all services are being notified for RCM liability, reverse charge liability. You need to go back notification number 13/2017, 13/2017, to check what all services are notified under RCM, reverse charge method. And what is time of supply? What is time of supply, point of taxation? Listen very carefully. Under section 13, subsection 3. Earliest of these two transactions, date of payment by the recipient or date following the end of 60 days from the date of invoice would be the POT, subject to RCM. Let me ask one question to all of you, because technically I'm saying lot of provision. Let me put one practical query to all of you. Let's say you got your advocate invoice. Advocate is subject to RCM, right? So business entity has to pay GST. Let's say your advocate has raised invoice on 1st May 2022. By when you are supposed to pay GST? You have not paid the amount to the advocate. Advocate raised the invoice for 10 lakh. You didn't pay to your advocate. Invoice of advocate was 1st May 2022, financial year 22-23. By when you will pay GST under reverse charge, RCM? Please try. I said earliest of two, date of payment. Date of payment is not there because you haven't paid the amount. Then date following the end of 60 days. So from 1st May 2022, 60 days to be calculated. Date following the end of 60 days would be the POT. You have to pay GST under RCM method. And RCM means you have to pay in cash. You can't use the credit. And if you have delayed in payment, then quite obvious interest is applicable as per this time of supply provision. And interest rate would be 18% per annum. So hope this time of supply, last date when you need to raise the invoice is being explained. Connecting another part to this, we all know that e-invoicing provision is now made applicable. E-invoicing. E-invoicing provision got started from October 2020. Initially, threshold was 500 crore, reduced to 100 crore, 50 crore, 20 crore, 10 crore, now it is 5 crore. And what is the e-invoicing provision? If you are a registered person in GST and your aggregate turnover exceeding 5 crore in any preceding financial year starting from 17-18, please, in any preceding financial year starting from 17-18, then you are required compulsorily to generate e-invoice from 1st August 2023. 1st August 2023. And when you are a supplier, you are liable to generate e-invoice, then you must generate e-invoice. Because your buyer, your recipient will get credit only on e-invoice generated by you. If you are not raising e-invoice, which you are supposed to, only raising tax invoice, then your buyer will not get credit. Eligible document to avail credit for the buyer is that e-invoice. So such buyer or recipient must cross-check. If you are purchasing from a supplier and supplier threshold aggregate turnover is more than 5 crore in any preceding financial year, starting from 17-18, then compulsorily your supplier must generate the e-invoice. I'm not discussing e-invoice at length, but this is what the provision. And you know that the e-invoicing is applicable for B2G transaction. So registered supplier raising invoice to government organization, government entity, and they are only deducting TDS under section 51. Even though this e-invoice is required, B2G, B2B taxable supplies, I'm saying B2B taxable supplies, corresponding debit note and credit note, and it is also covering your export of goods or services. E-invoice, simple in specified format, specified particulars. As per INB 01, you can generate from any accounting or billing software. converted into JSON file, transmitted to dedicated invoice registration portal, and portal will do deduplication check, verify everything, and then assign unique IRN number, invoice registration number, with QR code and digitally signed. This is called generation of e-invoice. You must go back and cross check. Another related point pertaining to e-invoice: what happens, sir, if system is down? I can't generate e-invoice. I have generated only tax invoice. Can I upload such invoice with a time lag? So maybe 25th of September I have generated tax invoice. Can I upload, let's say, on 10th of October or 10th of November or 10th of December? You'd be having this question in your mind. Let me clarify you that government has issued advisory, and they have said that from 1st November 2023, registered person whose aggregate turnover more than 100 crore, for them time lag, maximum time lag would be only 30 days, 30. So let's say if invoice generated on, tax invoice generated on 1st November, then compulsorily they have to upload the particulars and generate unique IRN number by 30th November. After that, IRP portal, invoice registration portal, will not permit, and this threshold only for registered person more than 100 crore. And let me tell you, over a period of time, this is going to be reduced. This is only facilitation measure which is being given by the government, and over a period of time this is going to be reduced. But from law perspective, if you look at bare law, you should raise invoice as per section 31 subsection 1 for goods, section 31 subsection 2. There is no choice in your hand. You have to generate accordingly. So this is pertaining to e-invoicing. Now coming back to delivery challan. We issue lot of delivery challan. First, for the job work, you may be registered principal sending input and capital goods to your job worker for job work activity, section 143. And there is specific provision that it should be bring back to your premises, registered principal premises, and period defined age, 1 year for input and 3 years for capital goods, which can further be extended, 1 year for the input and 2 years for capital goods, with the permission. You should ensure that such delivery challan whereby you have sent your input and capital goods for job work activity, there has to be corresponding time period compliances. If this time period compliances are not being made, then it is deemed supply. So you have to be careful, revisit all such job work delivery challan. Except this period specific calculation is not applicable for mold, dies, jigs and fixtures. Mold, dies, jigs and fixtures, it is not applicable. So this is what section 143. Another important one, sometimes goods are being sent to the customer for approval. And once approval is being received, then only we are raising invoice, right? Then there is specific provision under section 31 subsection 7. 31 subsection 7. Goods sent on approval must be closed within a maximum period of 6 months. It should come back within 6 months. If it is not coming back within 6 months, then you should raise invoice as and when the 6 months period is getting expired. 31 subsection 7. This is pertaining to delivery challan. Now coming back to credit note. When I'm filing my GSTR 1 as a supplier, I have raised the invoice. But after raising invoice, there may be instance that the invoice raised and where taxable value is being shown is a higher amount for any region. Let's say it should be 100, but I have mentioned 120, so it is higher. Even tax payable I have shown higher, or there is return of goods, or there is a deficiency in goods or services for specific situation. Section 34 talking about issuance of credit note in GST. And even credit note is being issued for post-supply incentive. Post-supply. After supply, you are giving some discount, incentive to your buyer, to your recipient. After supply is being made, it can be done through a credit note. So what is the time period for issuing a credit note in GST? It is 30th November. So if I am talking about financial year 22-23, any credit note pertaining to 22-23 must be done by 30th November 2023. So when supplier issuing credit note or adjusting the transaction of its outward supply through this credit note, or giving this credit note for post-supply discount or incentive, of course we got table 9 of GSTR 1. And during that month, your GST impact which is coming on credit note get adjusted with your outward tax liability in that particular month. So corresponding impact which you are filing in table 9 of GSTR 1 get net off in your GSTR 3B. When you are showing your outward supply, then you get the adjustment, corresponding adjustment of this credit note issued 30th November. Make sure. I will come back to this point little later. I have got one more point to address here, and which we will discuss while discussing ITC. So I'm parking this here. Just keep a note that time period for issuance of credit note is 30th November in GST. Another question which is being asked in a trade, do we really require to issue credit note under GST? Can't I issue financial credit note, commercial credit note outside the GST, whereby I will not show any adjustment with my outward tax liability? Neither I will show any adjustment with my outward tax liability, nor buyer or recipient need to reverse corresponding credit which is being taken as adjustment by the supplier. So just to clarify, I am repeating again, credit note issued by supplier and GST on that credit note amount, supplier gets adjustment of the GST charge on that credit note amount with its outward liability. Simultaneously, to that extent, recipient need to reverse credit so that it becomes revenue neutral whenever credit note under GST. But financial credit note, commercial credit note outside the GST, possible? Answer is yes, possible. If it is outside GST, no point. You need not require to show in 1 or 3B. No adjustment with outward tax liability for supplier, no corresponding reversal by the recipient or buyer. Possible, doable, financial credit note or commercial credit note. Now for financial credit note or commercial credit note, any time period? No time period. It can be per your convenience. So 30th November criteria which is applicable for credit note under GST only. For financial credit note, commercial credit note, no time period. Now coming back to debit note. Sometime it may happen that, let's say you have raised invoice for 100 rupees in 22-23. There was price escalation clause in the contract. And as per this price escalation, you will get 10% increase. So this 10% increase, you need to raise the debit note pertaining to your invoice raised in 22-23. Let me ask this question to all of you. Do we have any time limit for issuance of debit note? Please write your answer in question answers tab and answer H. There is no time limit for issuance of debit note. No time limit. You can issue as and when you want. But one corresponding question to all of you, related one. Let's say transaction of 1819, invoice was 100 rupees. On 25th September 2023, supplier and recipient agreed for the price escalation. Agreed for price escalation on 25th September 2023. Transaction of 1819. Now he is raising debit note dated today, 25th September, pertaining to 1819. My question to all of you, when raising debit note by supplier, GST leviable, no problem. But what happened? Your buyer, your recipient can get credit of this debit note which is pertaining to 1819, though it is dated today. Time limit to avail credit, section 16 subsection 4 of CGST Act. Whether he will get credit, say yes or no in your question answers tab and answer H. Credit would be available. This date on debit note pertaining to preceding financial year, like 1819 example which I took, is being delinked from 1st January 2021. So you need to look at debit note date today for determining time limit under section 16 subsection 4. So delinking is being done. Hope I am clear to all of you. 1st January 2021. So it was debit note and credit note. Now coming back to last component of outward supply. Sometimes we do mistake that whatever outward supply is shown in 1 is not matching with GSTR 3B. This may be intentional to pass on the credit to the buyer. So let's say there was 1 lakh rupees outward supply. You have shown 10 lakh rupees in your GSTR 1 to pass on the credit to your buyer. But you are paying tax only on 1 lakh rupees through 3B. So there is a mismatch, 1 versus 3B. It may be intentional, it may be unintentional. If it is unintentional, then quite obvious, you are not habitual offender. You are not habitually doing this transaction. You are not habitually showing like that. There may be some time to error is human, happened. Then you need not require to worry. You can reply back. And subsequent month you can always rectify this error that is available to you. But if you are repeatedly doing like this, 1 lakh is shown as a 10 lakh in 1 to pass on the credit to unscrupulous recipient and paying tax only on 1 lakh, and repeatedly you are doing that, then wake up call. Wake up call. Rule 88C. Notified from 26th of December 2022, not related to financial year 22-23. Can you say that? I'm asking you. Date of notification is 26 December 2022. So careful. You will get notice in DRC 01B Part A, and you need to reply within 7 days. Either you pay the differential amount or reply within 7 days Part B of DRC 01B. If you don't reply, don't pay, then notice for recovery, Rule 142B got notified 4th August 2023. And there would be notice for recovery even without issuance of so-called notice. So wake up call for all of you. So this was on ITC.